Welcome back to the afternoon session of the second day in the second week of the online platforms market inquiry. We are dealing with food delivery services and platforms today and tomorrow. And this afternoon session we have Uber Eats up next and then Quench following them. So I'm happy to invite the Uber Eats team into the virtual hearing room.
Good afternoon.
Welcome, and I believe it's Nakampi Molewa and Lindy Wundler. Is that right?
That is correct.
That's correct.
Mr. Molewa, I believe you have a presentation, so if you want to share that with us and then go through that, and then we'll follow that with questions from the panel.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Good. Can you see the presentation?
We can, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And thank you for giving us this opportunity to appear before the Commission. By way of introduction, my name is Nakampi Molewa, and I am the Uber Eats General Manager for Sub-Saharan Africa. And I will be presenting with my colleague, Lindy Wundler, who's the Senior Counsel for Sub-Saharan Africa. Okay. We will be covering four major areas during our presentation as articulated by the agenda today. We will provide a brief history of our beginnings. We will articulate how we work as Uber Eats. We will then focus on the South Africa business, and then we're going to round it off with a general discussion around some of the topics which are of interest to the Commission. Let me go back to the beginning, to how it all started. We are a fairly young company with its genesis in California in 2014. Then we were known as Uber Fresh, and we were running a seemingly sophisticated front end, as you can see by the picture, and operating with a rudimentary back end, as shown by the picture. You can see the trays of foods there. We changed our name to Uber Eats in 2015 and entered the South African market in 2016, starting in Johannesburg. We now operate in 16 cities across South Africa, and we are expanding beyond delivery. Brief description of our platform. So our platform brings together a three-sided market. At the center of this market are consumers who want to purchase food and other items for their convenience. We then have merchants who meet this need through offering wide selection on the platform. And last but not least, we have independent delivery people who provide the delivery services. So all three of these components come together and harmonize, and that's what makes the platform tick. It is important to note, however, that Uber Eats does not sell food or other items. We simply provide the platform. Brief description of how our app works. Our app is fairly intuitive and easy to use. The customer places an order, which is sent to the merchant who prepares the order. The order is then assigned to an independent delivery person who will execute on delivery. And that's about as intuitive as it gets, pretty easy to use. Just generally high level, if we had to look at our market with regards to independent delivery people and merchants, so we've got just over 9,200 independent delivery people on our platform and over 6,000 merchants to date. I'm going to transition now into explaining, how we work. In order of objectives, our business objectives are pretty simple. The first one is to have great merchants on the platform, because that's what makes the business tick. The second part is to ensure a magical customer experience through good delivery. And the last part of it is to let people know that we are there. And the way this comes together is that the merchants will offer choice and variety, and that works in attracting consumers to our platform. This lets independent delivery people to earn, further creating new economic opportunities on the platform. And this culminates in a magical experience for our customers through efficient delivery. If we delve a little bit deeper into the inner workings of the platform, we basically run 3 delivery models on our platform. The first one, which is the 3P model, this stands for third party, is the most common. And in a nutshell, generally a consumer would place an order and an independent delivery person would deliver the order to the consumer. So this is what most of our consumers on the platform are used to. There's another 2 formats that we run. So the pickup model, where the order is placed via our platform, but the consumer does their own pickup. And lastly, it is the BYFC, which is bring your own courier, where merchants use their own couriers to fulfill the last mile delivery via the Uber Eats platform. Allow me to deep dive into the mechanics of the 3P transactions, which is the most common delivery model. Basically, we charge merchants a marketplace fee for a variety of services that we bring, namely lead generations, payment processing, amongst other things. We then purchase delivery services from independent parties, and we resell these to the consumer. A delivery fee would be paid by the independent delivery person by Uber Eats. The merchants will then provide the goods to the consumers, and Uber Eats will collect all monies on behalf of the merchant. In addition to these monies that have been collected for the merchant, the consumer will pay a delivery charge to Uber Eats. Then Uber Eats will then transfer the cost of goods net, the MPF, to the merchant, and we will pay that delivery fee to the courier. Our other 2 delivery models, the pickup and bring your own courier, models are far simpler. And the biggest distinguishing factor over there is that only a marketplace fee is paid to Uber Eats with no delivery fees or charges involved. Let me deep dive or discuss some of the value that the platform brings to the 3-sided market. And I'm going to start with the consumers. For the consumer, value can be summarized as choice, right? Providing choice to them and providing convenience to them. Choice for us is a function of great selection on our platform, ensuring that we're catering to as many tastes as possible for our consumers. Convenience for us is a function of ease of using the app and driving that magical experience right through to delivery. If we look at the independent delivery people, value for independent delivery people is through the creation of earning opportunities for them, without really having the hassle to contract with each and every merchant they service. It's also the freedom to work anywhere and whenever they wish, right? Especially in underserviced areas outside the big metros where the platform is live. And finally, to ensure a better operating environment which is enhanced, we do look at things like on-trip insurance and contactless delivery during COVID, amongst other things. Moving into the merchants, value for the merchants is that ability to drive incremental revenue via an additional delivery channel, right? Giving them access to new markets and to new consumers. In summary, that is the key value that's given to merchants. In addition to that, there are a number of services that we do bring to merchants as well via the platform. Amongst them, lead generation services, which connect all three sides of the market. A front-end application called Restaurant Manager, which is used to facilitate the accepting of orders that are placed on our platform. Access to analytics generated by the above-mentioned application. Access to tools that enable merchants to maximize value from the tool. And lastly, support services for merchants in dealing with challenges regarding consumers and other eventualities. Moving into the third part, where we take a bit of a deep dive into South Africa. Again, just to recap the facts about Uber Eats in South Africa, we are 5 years old, having launched in September 2016. We operate across 16 countries, right? 16 cities with plus 6,000 merchants and plus 9,200 delivery people. I want to give an overview of the competitive landscape in South Africa. So the market in South Africa is very competitive. Right now, you do have two major players, which are Uber Eats and Mr. Delivery. Mr. Delivery predating Uber Eats, and in a way pioneering the sector, being the first aggregator globally, if I'm not mistaken. However, we have seen the entrance of the likes of Bolt Foods in the market, who are operating currently in Cape Town and Johannesburg, and are expanding rapidly. We have looked at opportunities within the township markets and have discovered players in areas like Gugulethu, Hammanskraal, and Soweto, to name a few. Players such as Mr. Fasty, Spaza Eats, and the likes. Other constraints, competitive constraints that we see are the likes of order-ins, delivery as a service offerings, merchants creating their own apps, which we do see as introducing competition, and different delivery modalities such as pickup. Competition is also stimulated by low switching costs, meaning multi-homing is a definite reality in South Africa. And this is also further driven by the fact that customer switching costs are also easy, fast, and low in the sector. As stated before, I think it's important to realize that this is a sunrise industry which is very young, right? As we look at the total addressable market in South Africa, we are hardly scratching the surface of potential, and the industry, we believe, has a fairly long runway for growth. It will continue to attract new players to the market. As a business in South Africa, we continue to evolve, introducing new features and amending contractual agreements, as given in the presentation. It is important that these changes, to note that these changes are all in response to a dynamic environment and balancing the need for financial sustainability, optimum consumer experience, and value for merchants and delivery people is considered. I think it's well worth noting that it's also vitally important for the platform to have good merchant mix. We recognize and appreciate the fact that merchants play different roles on this platform. Some of them may drive traffic onto the platform, while others may recruit first-time eaters, while others may drive basket sizes, amongst other things. It is important to acknowledge that our local favorites come from the ranks of small, medium enterprises and are an important consideration on our platform, especially in driving first-time eaters and returning consumers. As the model evolves, there's a shift towards non-restaurant opportunities globally, and South Africa is not exempt from this trend. At Uber Eats, we continue to explore these opportunities and gauge whether we can participate in some of these opportunities, which I'll address further down in the presentation. An example of one of these opportunities is Uber Direct. This is a solution that allows merchants to use their own platforms for order fulfillment and use Uber to fulfill the last mile delivery. We don't have a relationship with the consumer on this model. And it is these sort of products that are driving the evolution of the platform. On the non-restaurant operations, we launched our non-restaurant operations April 2021 at the height of the COVID lockdowns. We are servicing mostly grocery and convenience channels, while a number of other independent larger chains have signed up to be merchants on this platform. This is a very dynamic sector of the market, seeing massive activity as competitors such as Pick n Pay ASAP and Checkers 60 are very active.
One thing that is very interesting about the food delivery platform industry is how localized the nature of the business is. Uber Eats is an example of a business that has operations in many jurisdictions around the world. However, it's important to note that success in one part of the world does not necessarily guarantee success in all parts of the world. Indeed, Uber Eats is an example of this. It's been highly publicized, in fact, that Uber Eats has withdrawn from some markets where, unfortunately, we were not able to make a go of it. Examples of these are in the Middle East and North Africa, such as Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, as well as Argentina. Therefore, there is an impetus for us as Uber Eats South Africa to make sure that we are competing very strongly in the local markets and to make sure that we are participating on a local scale rather than on a global scale. Local considerations thus continue to be super important as we try to make a go of it in South Africa.
Turning our attention to the socio-economic benefits of Uber Eats in South Africa, I mean, it's safe to say that we are proud of the benefits that we bring about via the platform. Some of them, to enable restaurants to continue operating during COVID, is a major contribution by platforms such as Uber Eats. We create and continue to expand the reach of merchants to consumers to drive their own revenues. And this is particularly important for merchants who are SMEs, right? Who would not necessarily have this sort of exposure. And finally, the provision of earning opportunities to individuals, right, drawn from a very broad base. Illustrative of the type of power these platforms are driving. The potential for apps like ours to enable work on the continent is enormous. A report by BCG estimated that 3 million jobs could be enabled through online marketplaces by 2025.
Now, we often hear the terminology disruption, and certainly in the various modalities in which Uber operates, we've certainly been referred to as a disruptive entrant, and Uber Eats is no exception to that. Now, food delivery platforms certainly have characteristics that promote rivalry and competitive entry. And when Uber Eats entered South Africa, it certainly had certain positive effects for competition in South Africa. Firstly, Uber is a business as a whole, and Uber Eats specifically, that is in favor of good, strong, and positive regulations. Therefore, wherever we operate, we intend to and continue to work with regulators to ensure that we have markets in which regulators and regulations are put in place that continue to ensure good, strong, and positive competition in the category. In addition, making sure that you have non-exclusive, independent delivery people, and starting to encourage that sort of work amongst independent contractors benefits new entrants. They no longer have to try and sell that idea of an independent delivery person when they come in, because that has been created. When a new entrant comes in, they no longer have to familiarize people with the idea of ordering food on an app. They no longer have to familiarize people with the idea of someone they've never met dropping food off at their doorstep, or contactless delivery, or with the new technology that comes along with all of this. Therefore, by Uber Eats not necessarily introducing the idea of aggregators, but certainly of online food delivery platforms in South Africa, make sure that subsequent entrants into the market were able to have an easier go of it in coming into the South African market.
Moving along, we're going to look at some of the areas of interest to the inquiry. And the first one that I will address is visibility on the Uber Eats app. We could start by saying our primary objective is to provide maximum visibility, right, with the widest variety of merchants possible, right, to aid in that consumer choice that we've been articulating. Uber Eats does run a proprietary model for ranking on the workings of the algorithm, and have reverted with questions. So we are working on following up those questions. And it is important to point out to the Commission that as part of this kind of ranking theme and visibility, we do have a category of merchants called Top Eats who feature on the platform. But I think it is important to point out that those Top Eats are solely the preserve of small and medium enterprises, so that we can help leveling the playing field in terms of visibility. On paid advertising, so we recently introduced sponsored link functionality on the platform, and this enables merchants to submit offers for increased visibility on the feed. Listings are allocated through also a proprietary algorithm for transparency. Those merchants that appear via these sponsored links are tagged as such in the app. On promotions, so largely our promotions can be divided into two categories in the way we execute them, largely through the use of promo codes and restaurant offers. And maybe let me go into the two as to what they are. In the main, promo codes are unique codes that are applied to individual user profiles, and these confer a benefit to the consumer, right? And this benefit could take many forms. What is important there in the use of these promo codes is to note that these are solely created by Uber Eats and not our merchant partners. Restaurant offers, on the other side, is a solution that's actually targeted at merchants, and it gives them the ability to set up and run their own promotion activities on the platform to generate demand. All offers where they do apply are communicated on the app to alert consumers that they are available.
Now, one of the key questions that we have and would like to touch on is around business access to user data. I don't know about all of you, but I am certainly very concerned about where my data as a user of any app or any functionality or any technology is. And we ensure that all user data is governed and dealt with in accordance with applicable privacy laws. So user data is not capriciously shared or transmitted without appropriate permissions and outside of the ambit of appropriate law. Of course, merchants who are on the app do want to have certain information about how their products are being used, what sorts of sales they have, etc., because this is the core of how they're going to move forward with their business, right? However, we make sure that where there is access to user data, it is aggregated and anonymized such that they cannot reverse engineer and find the drilled down user data in contravention of applicable laws. It is important to note that, first of all, Uber Eats does not sell food or other items on the platform. Therefore, Uber Eats does not have a need for that drilled down information and again uses it appropriately. And secondly, that personally identifiable information is not shared in that three-way platform amongst or between users. It's also very important for us as Uber Eats to ensure that we continue to support smaller merchants. Nakampe spoke a little while ago about how certain promotions, for instance, or visibility is only available to smaller merchants. One of those ways is the availability of consumers to be able to access and see their local favorites. Those are smaller entities that are in their localities from which they can, for instance, order food or other goods. At the beginning and as the category develops, as more merchants come online, we have observed that a notable number of the merchants that are available in a person's feed as they look at the app continue to be and grow into being relatively small local merchants who have been active in the local environment or are active in the local environment more and more, as opposed to being the larger entities. And lastly, like Naki mentioned, Uber Eats does engage in promotional activities designed specifically to benefit small and medium enterprises. Another area of interest specifically to the Commission has been the existence of pricing parity or most favored nation clauses, MFN clauses in contracts. Uber Eats has not historically enforced any such clauses in South Africa. We do not feel that it is necessary to have such clauses in South Africa. They are redundant, aims and goals. They put their pricing for goods and services on the app, and that Uber Eats has no control over this. Next, just looking at the registration of business users on the app, a question that arises is, how exactly does someone become a merchant on Uber Eats? It's actually very simple. If you want to become a merchant on Uber Eats, you sign up. As long as you do not meet any negative health and safety concerns, or you're not a fraudulent operation, you can sign up, become registered on the app, and you're on, and you can begin operating. What we find is that we get a lot of interest from smaller and medium enterprises that operate in localities, have a small local following, and hopefully we've created a process that is easy for them to onboard onto the app. And this really ties into the next point, which relates to the fair treatment of business users. Our principles are really quite simple. We try to ensure fair treatment and transparency across our business users. We have standard contract terms that are readily available, publicly available for people to consider. But of course, a contract is only a contract on offer and acceptance, so the contract terms remain negotiable. Turning to the question of refunds, if there is an issue with regards to a delivery, an order, or anything of the sort, where a complaint is received from a consumer, Uber Eats generally does provide the refunds unless there's a suspicion of fraud or it is very, very clear that the complaint is unfounded. The guiding principle is that if the issue seems to have arisen in the preparation of the order, such as the preparation of a meal in a restaurant or a clearly missing item in a GROCO order, grocery and convenience order, then the restaurant or the merchant will pay for the refund. If the refund was necessitated, on the other hand, by a clear issue in delivery, for instance, you received your pizza upside down and all the toppings are at the bottom and the base is at the top, which no one wants, then chances are Uber Eats will take care of the refund. We think that this is a fair approach, and we continue to have conversations with merchants as to how this can best work across the board. I think this brings to an end our formal presentation, and we would like to thank the Commission for its time and indulgence, and we would like to invite you to ask any questions that you might have for Nakampe and myself.
Thank you, Ms. Hundler. Sorry, we've got a bit of feedback at the moment. All right, that's gone. And Mr. Molewa. Can I just start with the price parity clauses that, you say that it's not been enforced in South Africa. So I assume there was a price parity clause.
That is correct. When I first joined Uber Eats, I discovered the existence of a price parity clause in the contracts, which had not been enforced.
And so sorry, can you just enlighten us as to that clause that wasn't enforced?
I do not have the wording here with me. I can provide the full clause in writing. I think we have provided it to the Commission previously as well. I believe it asks merchants to have uniform pricing in their restaurants as well as on Uber Eats.
And across other platforms, presumably.
I'm not sure about that last part, I'm afraid. I would need to check.
Well, can you check?
I'll ask the team to check right now and we will respond, yes.
All right. And I presume let me ask, are these clauses still in any contracts?
These clauses are not in contracts. As soon as I became aware of the existence of the clauses, I first of all checked to see whether they had been implemented. The answer was no, or enforced. The answer was no. Second was to institute a robust overhaul of the contracts to ensure that the clause was removed, to ensure that there was no confusion whatsoever, and that people did not feel that they were obliged to abide by that clause.
And sorry, when did you join and when did you undertake this exercise?
This was in 2018. It would have been in or around September 2018.
All right, because I just want to understand when you talk about current contracts and not historic. So have historic contracts that were signed and are rolled over, do those still include these clauses?
No. We have done an overhaul of the contracts. So current contracts do not have this provision.
So there's no contract out there that has this provision?
I certainly hope not. I would be quite displeased if there was. May I please answer your question?
Certainly, go ahead.
The clause read, you agree that you will not make a meal available under this addendum at a price higher than one, the amount you are charging for similar meals when sold by you in your restaurant, or two, the amount you're charging for similar meals when sold by you through food delivery applications or food delivery services. So you're correct, it's the two-part restriction.
Well, thank you, and thanks to your team for quickly responding there.
Thank you, Mr. Hodge.
I mean, I just want to ask about enforcement and when you changed. So you became aware somewhere in 2018, and when did you change these?
I would need to get a printout for you. We did submit a printout to the commission because, of course, you can't unilaterally change contracts, bam, on the 1st of September 2018, all your contracts are changed. So it took some time to do the rollover. But we did provide a spreadsheet to the commission showing when the new contracts came into effect. So it was over a period of time.
All right, but then, sorry, I know I'm belaboring the point, but that's new contracts. What about a historic? Were those changed? Or was that a further rollover?
There was no rollover of historic contracts. When the historic contracts came up for review, they went on to the new contracts. And we also did a specific review of historic contracts to say these historic contracts with that clause will no longer be in effect and the new contracts will come into effect. And that was the process that took a while. I hope I'm answering your question.
Yeah, no, you are. I mean, when you say it wasn't enforced, was this communicated to the restaurants when you arrived?
We did not proactively communicate it to restaurants at the time. However, in January 2019, there was a news article by, I believe it was Wendy Noller, in a number of newspapers, where they did comparisons of prices of meals available on different apps and in the restaurants themselves, where they had a comparison where they showed that meals at Uber Eats were more pricey than in the restaurants themselves, as well as on other apps. And we gave out a press statement at the time specifying Uber Eats' principle that restaurants determine and set their own prices on the apps. And therefore, if they chose to place higher prices on the Uber Eats app as compared to in restaurants or on other apps, that was their prerogative. That was quite widely shared.
All right, but there was no official communication.
There was no outbound communication, no.
I mean, you'd accept, I assume, that that is not typically how you communicate with your contractual partners. Are following a press request for comment and then a comment. I assume other terms and conditions are changed with communication.
Sadly, I'm but a lowly lawyer, not a communications expert.
But you would accept as a lawyer, that's how you communicate changes. I mean, your contracts will say that if there are changes to the contract, that there are procedures to be followed.
So when we did roll out the new contracts, we gave training to the contract managers to explain what the changes were, but there was no like big press release to say, this is why we're changing our contracts. So there was one-on-one communication with the restaurants, but no general communication to say this is the specific change in the contracts.
Yeah. You see, I'm just trying to think of it from the restaurant side. Mm-hmm. All right. I have a contract that has terms and conditions, and this condition is in there. And this, as I understand, regulates my relationship with Uber. And if I'm in breach of this contract, then I can be off-boarded from the platform. Mm-hmm. And to the extent I'm getting benefits from in fact, deliveries that are boosting my business, I may be reticent to contravene one of these provisions while it remains in the contract, because it can be, because it's if you're getting past a note, I don't know. So for restaurants who want to remain on your platform, I'm sure many of them would say, well, I've had no official communication from this. I don't know what the stance is. And at the very least before January 2019, because even then there wasn't a press statement. So would you not accept that for many restaurants they may have adhered to this, even if you weren't policing it actively?
Might I perhaps explain how we work on contracts and how we work with the business on new contracts and contract changes and the like? Perhaps that might help illuminate some of this.
I think, can you just, if it helps answer my question.
Sure. So, like I said, I do the drafting of contracts. I'm sure it's a very boring job to many people, but what we do when we have the contracts as well is we tend to prepare a working document, usually a slide deck or the like, that explains what the changes in the contracts are, especially the key changes in the contracts. We then prepare this for the key account managers, who are the people who go out to the restaurants and have the relationship with the restaurants to say, hi, we have a new contract. This is what the new contract is about. These are the key changes in the contract, and this is how our relationship may or may not change as a result of the new contract that we're rolling out. So something like the change in the pricing parity clause would be communicated to the key account manager, and it would be my expectation that the key account manager would explain this to the restaurants. I accept that might not have happened in all circumstances, and that would certainly be something that we would need to look at to ensure that in all issues, in all circumstances, so that we have enhanced communication with the restaurants and merchants, especially on sensitive topics, such that they're aware of these changes.
But Ms. Mundla, that was after you arrived and with a change in the contract. I'm talking about before the contract was changed. And I don't think an account manager would go out there and say, well, here's a clause in your contract, don't worry about that, it's not in your contract, we're not going to. So what I'm proposing to you is that there's no official communication. Restaurants have it in their contract, are aware of breach conditions, and at the very least, even on what you're telling us, this ran for at least probably 3 years.
I will need to check when that contract came into impact, so I can give you the amount of the duration on which it is in impact. I'm afraid I cannot speak right now to the balance of that because of a lack of continuity in the business, but I can undertake to try and dig further to give you more information.
Yeah, well, I mean, we know it's in their contracts from when you launched, that's the 3 years. But tell me, this press statement, that goes to how they price relative to their menu, not how they price across platforms. So how were businesses meant to know that element of price parity, which is again in their contract, does not apply?
So the press statement did speak to pricing across platforms as well as pricing against the menu.
It's not reported in the Business Insider story that you sent us.
I do not have it before me, but if I could recall correctly, there were 3 columns, and I recall specifically there was a pizza restaurant that had prices on their own restaurant, prices on a competitor, and prices via Uber Eats.
Yeah, and I've got that article in front of me, and they're the same price on all the platforms. In fact, everyone listed here has the same price across the 2 platforms. So, as I said, maybe your statement reached some of the restaurants, and maybe it has something to do with how they price relative to their menu, but there's no statement around across platforms. So, I mean, again, would you accept that some restaurants, well, put it this way, the evidence in that article suggests that restaurants do actually price the same across the platforms, and that may be a result of their understanding of your clause.
This is certainly a very interesting observation. Thank you for drawing my attention to it.
It's a pleasure. I mean, actually following that article, I think some of the restaurants felt that they were under attack for putting prices above their menu prices. So a few days later, there was a further article because restaurants had come back to Business Insider and said that, so they say, after the publication of their Insider story, several food outlets reached out to highlight the fee the delivery services ask. So we had Spur spokesperson Moshe Apleni said all its delivery prices are 10% more than in the restaurants, but it's to account for the 20% fee. Another restaurateur said they have a handful of outlets and Uber Eats charges them 30%. I mean, they also say that Uber Eats and Mr. D encourage outlets to keep prices at in-store levels. So I think restaurants felt a bit unfairly picked upon by the press in terms of just, the fact that they're being called out for higher prices, and they're saying, well, actually, it's a product of the fees we're charged.
Yeah. So, Mr. Hodge, so what is the question? We're just trying to understand.
There's no question yet. I'm just making the observation that the fees. I mean, I suppose if there's a question, I mean, Spur's talking about 20% and the restaurant's talking about 30%. I mean, that's quite a difference. You'd accept that.
I'll go ahead.
The question. Yes, we do accept that there's a difference, Mr. Hodge.
See, the difficulty with a virtual hearing is we can't see who else is in your room, but we can hear occasionally a voice.
Oh, that was me whispering to Mr. Malewa, asking if I should answer or if he should.
So
we certainly accept that there is a difference. As I believe you'll be aware, Chairperson, we have provided significant and detailed submissions to the Commission on this point. And indeed, we claimed confidentiality over the specifics of the percentages that different restaurants pay, depending on which restaurant is which. We are continuing to engage with the Commission in writing, and we are very happy to continue to do so on the specifics of those percentages. We're more than happy to discuss it in a more general manner, but out of respect for the propriety nature and the confidential nature that relates to how we compete vis-a-vis different competitors in the food platform delivery market, we're a bit constrained to go into too much detail at this stage.
Well, don't worry, Ms. Wundler. I mean, this is in the public. It's in an article. Spur 20%, restaurateur 30%. So I just want to explore that with you. I mean, as I understand your model, your third-party model that you explained on your slides, I mean, effectively, you've got the merchant transaction, which is Uber Eats bills for the cost of the food, and then gives a share of that less the commission. And then there's separately the delivery element where you are charged a delivery fee and put that on the customer and pay the delivery driver. So if I understand, I mean, if I ordered a 200 Rand meal from the Spur, you would take 40 Rand. And if I ordered a 200 Rand meal from the restaurateur, you would take 60 Rand. I mean, it follows from the commission. Is that correct?
Mr. Hodge, just explain it to me. I'm just trying to follow you, the 40 Rand and the 60 Rand.
Well, if I have a 20% commission for Spur and a 30% commission for the restaurateur, I assume is an independent restaurant, and the meal was 200 Rand, and you bought from each of them, you would deduct 40 Rand from Spur and you deduct 60 Rand from the restaurant.
So, Mr. Hodge, again, I mean, we we also request from the Commission that we will not get into specifics, but for the purposes of the example, you would be correct.
Yeah, and I mean, Spur said that they get charged 20%. That was in the article. So it's not a hypothetical. And the restaurateur also said they got charged 30%. That's not hypothetical either. So we don't have to reverse what everyone gets or as a commission, but just dealing with these two.
We would need to check those figures because, of course, that's what is in the article, and that was some time ago. But again, just for the purposes of this discussion, let's speak about perhaps restaurant A with 20% and restaurant B with 40%. Would that be all right?
No, it's Spur and restaurateur. I mean, in essence, though, you make a lot more money out of the independent restaurant in that situation. You make 60 Rand compared to 40 Rand on the same order size.
So you are referencing to restaurants, and what I will say, Mr. Hodge, is that generally speaking, there are considerations that we look at when pricing, and some of the considerations that we do take into account is exactly what do restaurants and ourselves bring to the table. I think we traverse some of these.
Sorry, Mr. Malewa, I just do want to interrupt.
Yes, sir.
Because, as I said, the disadvantage of a virtual hearing is that we don't know who's in the room. But as I sit here, there's clearly reading prompts from behind the camera. So I am asking that whoever else is in your room refrain from interfering and then allow us to have a participation with the two of you who have come forward.
Mr. Hodge, I can assure you I am not reading any prompts. Perhaps when I'm thinking, I'm looking away from my camera, but there is no reading of prompts, sir.
I'll proceed then. Sorry, I interrupted you, so I don't know if you want to proceed.
Yeah. So as I was saying, there are some considerations that go into our pricing philosophy, and we've traversed some of these in our presentations. We will take into considerations, some merchants that we deal with do come with massive brand equity, and we use them to drive traffic and first-time eaters on our platform. Some restaurants and SMEs are termed what we term local favorites, and it would do us well as a platform to have those restaurants on our platform that will drive pricing decisions. And yes, there will be smaller restaurants who come onto the platform, and we provide a valuable lead generation service to them and a marketplace which will have a different pricing regime. So while we accept, yes, prices are different, but I think maybe the general statement of merchant A versus merchant B is different in general terms may not necessarily hold.
Thanks, Mr. Mulewa. I mean, you were at pains in your presentation to say, first of all, the main thing you are offering customers is choice. Now, independent restaurants bring more choice. If I look at Steers, McDonald's, and Burger King, it's the choice of burger, but it's a burger. The range of cuisines are primarily provided by independent restaurants. And you were also at pains to say that things like basket size and all of that feed into this. So there's a lot of value that is bought by independent restaurants. I mean, wouldn't you agree?
Yes, we agree.
So the way it seems to us, and maybe to these restaurants, is small businesses subsidizing big business on your platform. Small business at 30% is covering more of your costs than big business at 20%. I mean, why would that be an incorrect observation?
I will go back, I think, to the observation that we made, that generally that statement is not applicable in all senses. So that's where we will begin. Even for small businesses, there are a number, like I said, I think, whom we term top eats. And we term them that because they bring almost the kind of same attributes that we'll be looking at as from the bigger businesses that you know. They're local favorite. They do drive traffic. They do drive basket sizes. And what I'm saying is that those businesses, even though small, right, we would tend to look at them, right, almost through the same lens, because those are the things that we value, right, and think about as we price.
So can you tell me any local favorite gets exactly the same as a KFC or McDonald's commission rate on your platform?
Like we said, Mr. Adju, we're not going to go into specifics of pricing, but happy to go through in a more confidential session with the Commission exactly how we tier our merchant partners and how we look at their pricing.
I mean, Mr. Valewa, why I'm raising this is you seem incredibly uncomfortable with this line of questioning. And I'll tell you why. Because it is uncomfortable for Uber Eats. And the reason you're hiding behind confidentiality is because actually it's not fair. Because, funnily enough, with transparency comes fairness. Because once it's transparent, then you have to defend it, not to me. You don't have to defend it to me, and it's the inquiry, not the Commission. You have to defend it to the restaurants on your platform. And here is a public hearing. You have an opportunity, and you're choosing not to. But can you explain to that restaurateur why they are paying 30% and Spur is paying 20%?
We are open to discussing those pricing, the pricing differentials, Mr. Hodge. We could happy to explain to them. But again, like we said, we do think this is competitively sensitive information for us, and probably not the best platform to discuss specifics.
Well, I'm just dealing with Spur and the restaurateur. That's in the public domain. Spur went and put it out there because they felt attacked about putting their prices up, and therefore they put it out in the domain. So that is not confidential, and I just want to understand whether you have anything left to say to the restaurants that predominantly pay 30%, because, you know, there's recent press articles, you know, even from 2021, which are saying small independent restaurants say they have little choice but to pass these costs on to the consumer to make a profit, and as a result, they typically charge the full markup amount, which is usually around 30%. That's what independent stores are saying. They're in that region, 30%. National chain, Spur, 20%.
I think what we would, you've given us an opportunity to, I believe, have our final say on this topic, which is that continue to work with our restaurant partners and our merchant partners. And we look forward to discussing this in more detail in a closed and confidential session with the Commission, because of course we cannot violate that confidentiality.
As I said, you don't have to explain it to us. Well, obviously you will, but you also need to explain it to your business users. I mean, you ended off your last slide says Uber Eats aims to ensure transparency and fairness across its business users. Now, is that lip service or is there actual transparency and fairness?
Mr. Hodge, we think it is not lip service. We do find ourselves in a position that we are being requested to disclose information for now that we are not in a position to disclose publicly. And that is the major consideration set for us right now.
Look, I'll end it there, but let me say that's not an answer. We have information in the public domain which you have failed to actually explain to the public, which includes your restaurant partners, what that difference is. I would assume those restaurants paying 30% are unaware of what other restaurants are paying. And so there isn't the degree of transparency that you allege across your business users. I mean, would that be correct?
No. So again.
So business users know exactly what others are paying.
I mean, it is confidential. We deal with business users on a case-by-case basis. So I would not necessarily deal with the business user A and disclose business users B's, terms and conditions.
Not to mention that our competitors are inevitably dialed into this call, are they not?
Yeah, and as I said, I'm not looking for specifics at all. I'm looking for what is the range. But let me just pick up, as I said, that last, when I read out that last, and this is from, I think, June this year. So maybe that was possibly in the third wave, and hence delivery was much more a topic of conversation. And that article seemed to suggest that the small independent restaurants have little choice but pass it on. They mark up 30%. And we heard Spur, say that they also marked up because that's why they were trying to explain the difference in price. They would come to the press and said, well, we also get charged. But what's interesting is Spur is marking up 10% according to this article, and maybe this journalist lives in my area because two local favorites, Croft & Co. and Cafe Picobella Trattoria, were marking up 20 to 30%. Now, if you are paying a higher commission, it would seem that may prompt you to mark your prices up higher because, Spur may have said, I'll take a 10% hit. I'm charged 20%. I'm putting my prices up 10%. But the independent restaurant facing a 30% as opposed to a 20%, can't necessarily take a 20% hit, so they're putting up their prices by 20 or 30%. I mean, that's what we're seeing in the article. So would you not accept that the higher the commission fee, potentially the higher the markup?
I'm afraid we do not have the article to which you refer in front of us, which would be the first point. So I'll just need to respond.
Sorry, Ms. Wundler, all due respect, you sent us this article.
Oh, is it the article from 2019? I
Correct.
Thought you said
where, as you see, you will see they price the same across the two platforms, and they list 6 restaurants in a table.
Okay, my mistake. You said June 2021, so I thought it was a different article. So just responding to your question now that I have the full context, it is important to note that we do not look into the pricing philosophy of each independent merchant or restaurant. Of course, it is fully up to them to determine how they do their pricing. Nakampe, would you like to add anything on that score?
No, I mean, again, I would just echo that. So, is it possible, Mr. Hodge? Maybe it is. But again, we don't control the pricing of our merchant partners at all.
I'm more saying as a matter of logic, if restaurants are passing on this commission, if you charge me 20% to Spur or 30% as an independent restaurant, the independent restaurant's more likely to pass on more because they're being charged more. Because that's the philosophy of many of them, that I need to pass some of this fee on because otherwise it eats into my profits.
Again, Mr. Hodge, we're not disagreeing with you. We're saying it is possible, but again, we're just highlighting that what they pass on, we have no say or control over.
But you do have control over the commission fees. So when you charge that independent restaurant 30% and you charge Spur 20%, you must expect that either they have to swallow another 10% in margin and suck it up, or they're going to pass that on to the consumer.
Yeah, look, two very possible outcomes, Sarge.
Not
again,
just possible, Mr. Malewa, it's inevitable.
we will defer to that wisdom, Mr. Hodge. But again, that is not something we can anticipate. And again, I think we'll go back to say how they do react is not within our purview.
And all I've put to you is that you do control that by determining the commission fees. And so the consequences are certain and result in higher prices for independent stores, otherwise lower profitability. It's inevitable. Can I ask, can restaurants tell the consumers through your app or through the delivery that next time they should order direct, it's cheaper?
Through the app?
No.
They cannot communicate via the app, but I personally have instances of where I have received in an order bag several times links to their websites and links to their own personal apps, encouraging me to order direct. Yes.
And are they allowed to do that, a part of the terms and conditions, to solicit customers from the Uber app?
They're certainly not prevented from doing it.
So any restaurant can, in their delivery, tell the consumer next time, come direct, it's cheaper. And you wouldn't have a problem with that.
We don't encourage it, Mr. Hodge, but it does happen. But again, we do not take active steps
to encourage them to do it.
To encourage it to do it or to mitigate against it.
So there's nothing in your contract, again, that states that they cannot solicit the customer.
I will need to double check the contract because you're looking at me very sternly, but we certainly have never wrapped them over the knuckles and said, you bad restaurant.
But that's a question of enforcement, or that we've already traversed, versus what's in the contract. And if it's in the contract, then there's self-enforcement. And I pity the poor restaurant that happened to send their food to you as the legal head of Uber. Maybe they'll be more careful in the future. But as I said, rules can be put in place to result in self-enforcement. And that is the truth of contracting.
Yeah, we'll certainly respond to that in writing to you. Like I said, I've received it a number of times myself.
Well, I think the public would like to know, to be honest.
I've asked for that to be checked right now. If I can, I will respond during this hearing. If not, I will respond in writing, but I would like to respond during the hearing if I can.
Thank you very much. And I know your team is efficient, so. And it is interesting that you can notice that I'm sternly looking at you as opposed to Mr. Bolewa. But anyway, clearly virtual hearings still have an element of physical.
They work.
And I assume because it's confidential, you obviously don't tell the public what you're charging the restaurants.
No, we do not communicate that.
And is there anything restricting the restaurant from telling customers what is charged? Or would they be bound by confidentiality?
I'm just mentally running through the contract right now. Can I ask for that to be looked up as well and to respond to you later on the call?
That's fine. It's impressive that you can run through in your head.
I'm trying.
I mean, the reason I raise this is in a completely different context, but one which I think has some parallels. In app stores, there was a recent decision in the Apple versus Epic case, and you may not be familiar because you're not an app store, but in that particular case, in a sense, the court bemoaned the extent of secrecy that ultimately undermines consumer choice. So they say, look, consumers do not know that if they subscribe to their favorite newspaper on the web, all the proceeds go to the newspaper rather than the reduced amount by subscribing to the iOS device, which is Apple. And while some consumers may want the benefit Apple offers, and there are many maybe, Apple actively denies them that choice. And that is the concern that they raise. So in your context, consumers may love the delivery you provide, and certainly my daughters do. But if they're informed, they can make an informed choice and weigh up the value add that you're providing compared to going direct and exercise that choice. But at the moment, and we'll see when you come back, it's not apparent that consumers know how much is being charged to the restaurants that they routinely deliver from. And if they did, they might exercise that choice. They might say, my local favourite's down the road, let me go pick it up. Phone them and pick it up, because they're going to get the full amount. But transparency has its benefits. I mean, would you not agree?
Transparency certainly, do you want to go ahead and help me? Transparency certainly has its benefits. And Mr. Hodge, I think this is an interesting topic that we could discuss for quite some time, and trying to figure out as a relatively new segment how we continue to foster this transparency. So for instance, if you choose to order from a certain merchant on the app, you can see their address, you can see their telephone number. So you are able to click on more information and get their operating hours and their contact details and contact them directly. Is that enough transparency for them to be able to make a choice between ordering direct with the merchant versus going with the app? Or is there more that we can do, bearing in mind that an app is a relatively small amount and a relatively small screen? So I think that is an interesting discussion point that we can certainly take forward as we continue to iterate, develop, and look at how this category continues to develop. Yeah, I totally agree with you that transparency doesn't improve consumer choice. And it's something that is continuously at the top of our minds as we continue to iterate and grow as a category.
Sorry, just on the issue of transparency. Sorry, I'm just trying to wade through your slides here. You may or may not be aware, but in Europe there's a platform to business regulation. Are you aware of that?
I believe there might be a draft regulation, if I'm not mistaken.
No, so there's a draft of the Digital Markets Act, which is to act against gatekeepers. But what came into force, I think 2 years ago, or maybe last year, was the platform to business regulations governing, in effect, transparency between the platforms and the businesses that operate on them.
I'm afraid I cannot speak to that. You're teaching me something new here.
Well, I'm pleased I could teach you something new. I just want to ask, I mean, the one thing you've claimed confidentiality over, despite sort of traversing it, is on your ranking and your ranking algorithm. And yes. I just want to understand why.
Because I think we do see it. We do see it as a competitive advantage. Our sponsored listings is offered as an additional tool for those who want to use it. We do see it as giving a competitive advantage, especially to the likes of the smaller merchants, whom the marketing budget may not, marketing and promo budgets may not be that big, who do require the sort of visibility that other players would get. So we do see it as a pivotal tool for us, and something that does give us a competitive advantage versus our competitors.
I mean, I assume ranking has some impact. So I'll come to sponsored ranking after this. But where you rank, I think we've been hearing for over a week now, matters.
Yes, it does.
You see, I mean, why I raised it is, I'm sure Uber operates in the European Union. You may not be familiar, so I'm not going to ask you to talk about how they comply, but part of those platform to business regulations cover transparency of ranking. And it's not here's an algorithm, because clearly that has confidential elements. But they start by saying the ranking of goods and services by the providers of online intermediation services has an important impact on consumer choice and consequently on the commercial success of the business users offering those goods and services to consumers. They sort of define ranking, but I don't want to bore you with that. I think we're all familiar with ranking. And they talk about predictability means that providers of online intermediation services determine ranking in a non-arbitrary manner. Providers should therefore outline the main parameters determining ranking beforehand in order to improve predictability for business users, to allow them to better understand the functioning of the ranking mechanism, and to enable them to compare the ranking practices of various providers. So they kind of proceed to say the specific design of this transparency obligation is important for business users as it implies the identification of a limited set of parameters that are most relevant out of a possibly much larger number of parameters that have some impact on ranking. The regulations also proceed to say that businesses should say why they chose these parameters and not others. So certainly the European Union has felt the need for the benefit of both, I suppose, consumers, but also predominantly business users who operate on the platforms, that they know the main parameters. And I think even last week, it may have been at a high level, but But certainly Google came and gave us the main parameters for their search, and a few other platforms in travel accommodation and even in app stores. So I just want to ask, do you want to persist with the confidentiality, or do you want to tell the restaurants what are the main parameters that affect their ranking?
At present, our view, and thank you for that elucidation, but at present our view is that our ranking is integral to how we see our business. And it's not so much as versus our restaurants rather than versus our competitors, because it really does speak to how we see our business uniquely vis-a-vis our competitors. And disclosing that might give insight into how we view our business, our strategic plans and the like, and what moves we might be making in the future with regards to our insights about our business. You've certainly given us food for thought. And I think we would want to certainly go back and review our confidentiality claim in light of what you've just shared with us now.
Because it would seem Uber, who has a obviously unique model, would have to comply with this in the European Union. So the businesses there would know. And we have seen these declarations. They are quite high level. They're not, exactly how much weight or anything is given to each factor. That is proprietary, but it is about the businesses knowing. So I'm just suggesting that in other markets, Uber Eats would be making this transparent at the right level of aggregation.
Yeah, look, Mr. Hodge, I think it is food for thought for sure. And it is something, as you say, if our partners in Europe are looking at doing this, and it does set a higher standard and benchmark in terms of transparency, of course we'll consider it. But this just for us in South Africa here hasn't kind of entered that orbit, and we would need to sit down and consider it. But for sure, point taken.
Maybe just a last point on that slide. The one thing I find fascinating is last week, at least players like Google were at pains to tell us that this is all about consumer relevance, the best ranking for consumers. But you don't say that at all. You don't try to reassure consumers. Your presentation says these are designed to maximize certain identified objectives for the platform. So they're done in a manner to maximize your objectives, not the consumer, not the business user. Do you want to respond to that?
Look, of course, part of it is looking at the consumer. And I know we'll cover sponsored rankings later, but I think this was also introducing some of these new products was also in response to doing this to make sure that we do enhance that consumer part. But for sure, at the moment, what we have admitted to the commission, Mr. Hodge, is that the facts that you've given us around Europe, the trends that we're moving in, especially in light of disclosing some of these ranking parameters, we do take the counsel, and we will look at it. We will look at it closely.
And if I can just add one more point, I think our terminology is slightly different to the terminology other people use. So we use consumer to refer to the person who, at the end of the day, eats the meal or receives the parcel of groceries or whatever the case is. But in actual fact, because this is a three-sided marketplace, there are different categories of people to consider who all might be consumers, whether it's the person receiving the goods or services, whether it's the restaurant, or whether it's the independent delivery person. So in circumstances such as this, when we refer to benefits for the marketplace, in many instances, we're referring to all three players in the three-sided marketplace.
But ranking affects consumer choice. I mean, you accepted that. And we're talking about the person who eats the meal, because that's what's presented to them.
Sorry, I missed that.
I said ranking affects the final consumer choice, because that's the person choosing a meal of what they're going to eat. And so we're talking about that consumer.
It also affects the restaurant, because the ranking affects the choice of restaurant. And it also affects the independent delivery person, because the independent delivery person who is near the restaurant is the one who gets chosen to go and deliver that meal. So it really does affect the three-sided marketplace, and we can't focus on one at the expense of the other two.
No, exactly. I would agree with you. It affects the restaurant. I hadn't thought of the delivery driver, but that's why transparency matters. I mean, it does affect people. And that's why
Yes.
the European unions felt the need to regulate this, because it wasn't voluntarily done.
And that's why we're so excited that you brought it to our attention.
Yes.
Well, I look forward to public announcements soon then on this front. And as I said, it's great that we know what your parameters are, but we don't list on your platform. We do order your food, but certainly I think it's more for the business, the merchants, as you call them, the restaurants, the consumers, and maybe even the delivery drivers.
Yes, we take it under advisement, Mr. Hodge.
Then maybe just on sponsored ranking, I mean, you did highlight one thing, that you're transparent. And can I ask why you feel the need to make it transparent? By putting sponsored on. That's what I mean by transparent. Sorry if I was a bit ambiguous.
Because I think it is important. It is important. So the ranking system is there, but as well, I think it is important to highlight where the counterpart is a sponsored link. And the reason we say that, Mr. Hodge, is that a lot of these parties that are using sponsored links are the small medium enterprises that are coming onto the platform and using this. So again, if we believe that this intention is to give visibility to those sort of merchants that would not necessarily have it, I think it makes sense to make sure that we do highlight them when they do use this product and increase visibility.
In addition, there are guidelines. I'm just trying to recall which guidelines they are. I think they're advertising standards guidelines that encourage the tagging of sponsored listings as such. And of course, we do seek to abide by those guidelines. I'm just getting the name of those guidelines for you.
If you could, because I wasn't aware of that, because we're certainly observing that many platforms don't do this. And that's why I was interested as to why you do it. And Ms. Wundler, if there are guidelines, I assume it's a guideline, not a binding regulation then.
I'm getting those details for you just now.
Great, thank you. And I think the public would like to know. And I think you're right, Mr. Molewa. I think it's fair that the public are assumed that are told that this is sponsored. It may still suit their needs and they may still want to click through, but they do so with their eyes open, and that's transparency, I suppose. Maybe just moving to your list of competitors. Sorry, I just need to find it. You talk about the, I mean, as you, I think, readily said, yourself and Mr. D are the two big fish in the bowl. Bulk food is expanding. But then you go, I mean, constraints from local food delivery. And I just wanted to ask about some of those, because obviously we're interested in talking to as many platforms as we can. But Spaza Eats, we're unable to get hold of. Their website doesn't come up. There's no app. I mean, are you aware whether they're even operational anymore?
I can come back to you on that, Mr. Hodge. But as far as we know, this was the list of the small ones that we identified playing in mainly the township markets.
So there can't be a big constraint if you're not aware if they're still operating.
Yeah, I think the overall point that we're trying to drive here, Mr. Hodge, is that there are markets clearly where Uber Eats is not operating, and these are the townships. This year, for the first time, I think we've made a concerted effort to try to enter some of these markets. Outside of Soweto, which was the only one that we've been operating in. But these markets are difficult, and what we are finding is that there are these smaller players who seem to have started there. So yeah, while at the moment, in terms of size, they're very small for sure. We cannot afford anyway to keep our eyes off these players, because we do regard them as competitors in those niche markets.
Mr. Mulewa, your slide says constraints on the food delivery offering are also exerted by, but you're telling me you don't operate in the same places that those township delivery services do. So how do they constrain you?
So, Mr. Hodge, we didn't historically. We have moved into 3 townships so far this year. And again, as we roll out this thing, it's a less than 6-month journey that we've been on. Yes. The likes of the Atteridgeville or Mamelodi, we haven't been operating there, for more than a month and a half. These are new areas to us as well, as we enter these markets. And for sure, when we do look at these markets, we do see these people as competitors. If you look at these markets, we are tiny there, right? It's not like we're driving large businesses like in Joburg suburbs. We are very, very small there, and these competitors become significant.
I mean, look, I'd just put to you that it's very easy to find a list of anyone who's offering delivery, throw it in your presentation and say, these are constraints. It's quite another thing that they actually are. Because, I mean, even Orakasi, as I understand, is not in Mamelodi or Atteridgeville, they're in Khayelitsha, Langa, Gugu, and Nyanga. So they're not necessarily where you are either. And from what we can see, My Chef is a virtual restaurant, not a platform.
Mr. Hodge, I mean, we were putting in examples, and for sure, the likes of Gugulet. I mean, Gugulet is a market that we've been looking at in the Cape, looking at entering that market. So for sure, we do accept that while some of these are not in scope yet, they are on part of our rollout plan.
All right, but they're not a constraint on your business right now, is as I understand the answer.
When our sales managers go to restaurants to seek opportunities to sign them up, these are the people who they say they're currently working with. That is the short answer.
In your slide presentation, you also said you had a slide on the benefits to others of a disruptive entrant, that you kind of make consumers familiar, merchants, delivery people familiar with your new technology. You're almost, I suppose, paving the way for others, is the way you put it. So subsequent entrants are able to benefit from much of the work done by a disruptive entrant. It's slide 30. And unfortunately, the public doesn't have it, but I read through. I mean, would you accept that in the townships, it's exactly you that's benefiting from the paving the way done by others, that it is exactly the Order-Kasi, Spaza Eats, and the like that have familiarized consumers, worked out how to operate in those more difficult environments, signed up restaurants, got the restaurants familiar with their app, and trained delivery drivers. So they've done the disruption. They were first. Would you accept that?
I think that's a fair comment. I mean, just by their very nature that they were first there.
Yeah, well, the township consumer who can't get Uber Eats, isn't familiar with food delivery, needs to have that trust built, needs to know it works. Sometimes payment methods have to be, determined. But that has been the innovation of exactly these companies. And now consumers are more comfortable, merchants are more comfortable. The delivery drivers are going to come, they'll get credited in their bank account, and it works. Not so.
Fair assessment, Mr. Hodge.
And look, tomorrow we'll hear from one such player as well. I mean, what do you think is going to happen to those platforms when Uber Eats enters with your big promotions?
Well, look, it is difficult to hypothesize, and I say that because these markets are new to us as well, Mr. Hodge. Like I said, I think we are in Soweto at the moment. We've just started to enter other townships, and I did name Mamelodi. I think Umlazi was one that we also are looking at rolling out soon. Attridgeville. So it is a lesson for us, as well. To predict how it's going to turn out, it depends how entrenched these competitors are. At the moment, it is a steep learning curve for myself and my team as we assess these markets, because these are not traditionally markets that we operate in.
Fair enough. I mean, I assume when you go in, as I would read your business model, you will offer consumers, incentives, promo codes, as you put it, where the consumer punches that in and they can use that for the order, because that seems to be, part of your customer acquisition strategy.
A part of it, Mr. Hodge, but I think we've got other avenues that we also use there as part of our entry strategy.
I'm sure you've got others. I'm just saying a prominent feature of your platform is is the use of promotions to drive orders and acquire customers. It's not the only thing, but that's quite a prominent feature.
Yeah, I mean, we would disagree on prominent because when we do assess markets, like I said, there are other features that we do look at, which promo is part, it is only but a part of.
I mean, if we look at other areas, I mean, we heard this morning from Buzz Delivery, and you may or may not have been in on that session, but the person from Buzz was almost listing the graveyard of South African platforms, obviously other than Mr. D, Appetite, Order In, Extreme Delivery, I can't remember who else, but you know, the feedback we are getting from these smaller platforms is you just simply cannot match 50 Rand off an order every week, or free delivery, and the deep capital and backing of yourself and Mr. D and possibly Bolt really make it impossible to compete. I mean, what's your view of that?
I'm not sure. I mean, look, we've been in the game for 5 years in this country. And again, this is such a new market which is fast developing. So to say that they cannot succeed, I cannot. I really cannot talk to that. But I mean, if we had to look, internationally, if memory serves, there have been markets where Uber Eats have had to pull out because competition was growing so rapidly that we also couldn't keep up with the competition and had to abandon those markets. I think, if I'm not mistaken, China comes to mind, where Didi Foods did that, right? So it's a really difficult question to answer, because some of it, yes, does lie in, the Ubers, the Mr. Ds and the Bolts are big, they got capital. But some of that also lies in the competitor strategies of these smaller players, who may or may not even probably know the markets in which they operate even better than us. So what I'm trying to say, there's no guarantee me going into Atteridgeville, I'm suddenly going to become the biggest player. We're certainly trying to push, but we found these markets really, really difficult because we are also learning.
But where you have operated in the urban areas, metros of Cape Town, Johannesburg, Durban, I don't think we've got many small players left. I think most have closed their doors because, Didi is a giant in itself, as we know. It seems to be that if the business model is fund massively losses up front in order to acquire consumers and get them on board, that you obviously have to have capital to match that, because I'd be stupid as a consumer to pass up my 100 Rand off or free delivery, and use someone else. I mean, is that not fair? It doesn't mean that here you face Mr. D and Bolt, but is it fair that the small players just can't match those promotions?
Yeah, I mean, sitting on this side of the table, that's a really difficult answer. I mean, that's a really difficult thing to confirm, Mr. Hodge. Yes, they're going to face hurdles, and I mean, that's not lost upon us. For sure, would they have a heavier lift? Probably. given the advantages that the rest of the people, the rest of the competitors do have. Is it fair? I'm not too sure how I answer that question.
However, we also, I think, need to respect the fact that there are competitors out there who have started off in one segment and have pivoted based on competitive pressures to see how they can readjust their business model based on, for instance, the technology they have at hand, the relationships they have built, to be able to compete in an adjacent sort of category. So you gave the example of order in, for instance. You might no longer, as a consumer, necessarily have the order in app on your phone to be able to order from them as an aggregator, right? However, we are aware that they have a white label solution where they run the back end of technology for many restaurants, and I think also perhaps some aggregators. I guess you would need to confirm that with them. So they are able to continue offering food delivery as a service or the platform in this new iteration, and they do continue to exercise or give some constraints or competitive constraints in this new world that they have. So an adept business, a savvy business that has the technology in hand is able to pivot to continue competing, I think.
Well, maybe not competing, but maybe just retain a business of some sorts. And that, I mean, is interesting because I think, as you highlighted, the grocery game seems a very different game to us from restaurants. But in restaurants, it's starting to look like, money talks. Whereas grocery, the partnerships that are forming with big chains seem to be changing that dynamic.
And I think that's a very important point to bring up, because that's another example of, I think, an app which was in more the traditional food delivery platform space, Bottles, which teamed up with Pick and Pay and now is Pick and Pay ASAP. So again, pivoting the business model into something which now is absolutely massive, and we're seeing that consolidation across the board. Is grocery and convenience necessarily a completely different line of business from food delivery? I'm not sure. As the category continues to grow and develop and iterate, I think there is some splitting, but there's also some convergence where some of these things are more alike than we think.
Yeah, and look, I suppose out of necessity, platforms must find a way to keep their business moving, because it's tough to be in the same playground as yourself and Mr. D. One thing that was highlighted earlier in the morning session by Sisters on the Move was that most of the drivers on the platforms are not South African. And obviously one of the objectives of our act is about employment creation, but it's also, employment creation amongst the citizens of South Africa as well. So I just wanted to get a sense, and it's very broad, what proportion of Uber Eats' 9,200 drivers, I think you said, are South African?
I'm afraid we don't have those numbers available. And full disclosure, simply because we do not record the information in that manner.
And, I mean, any sense of the extent to which the drivers are local?
No, yeah, I wouldn't know, Mr. Hodge. I mean, we could try to determine, but I'm not even sure how. But no opinion on that at the moment for now.
Like I said, we simply do not record it in that manner, I'm afraid.
I mean, but would you accept that that's a fair observation? I mean, that's the observation of I don't think it's limited to Sisters on the Move.
I cannot discount their observation. What I do agree with Sisters on the Move on, because I did get some feedback on their presentation this morning, is that we should certainly look to continue to empower local people, especially in light of our significant unemployment numbers, to be able to grow businesses if they want to seek employment, if they want to be independent delivery people, to have the opportunities to be independent delivery people. And this is certainly something that I would 100% support, that they should be able to, that we should be looking to continue to support people in seeking work opportunities.
So does Uber have a program to support South African citizens to become drivers, much like Sisters on the Move?
We have had one or two programs in the past. I do not have the details with me right now. Being able to do this at scale has been challenging. I can try and draw down numbers on, I think we ran one sprint a couple of years ago before the lockdown. Things have been a bit difficult since COVID came into effect to do things in person, but I can try and track that down.
So one sprint a few years ago, that's it.
That I'm aware of. I've only been around for 3 years, and COVID has been 2 years.
But in the 3 years you've been around, one sprint a few years ago.
1 year, one sprint in my 1 year, and the last 2 years have been lockdown.
No, I mean, we're all battling with lockdown, but they're not looking at a complex program, a long program, and they're a small business, but they recognize almost their social obligations to the country in which they're operating in, and the high unemployment rate and the challenge for government, and they're making that investment, notably without even the backing of funders.
We 100% recognize that we have an obligation to the countries in which we operate, South Africa being notable amongst those. Can I give the name of the partner? I'm not sure if I can give the name of the partner. I'm sorry, I think the agreement is confidential, but I will send it through to you. We also recognize that it is very important to keep people safe, keep people protected. You will have seen that we put in programs to keep our courier delivery people protected during the lockdown. A lot of these programs that we put in place, such as the one I'm going to send you details on, required in-person engagement, actually going out to communities, identifying people who had a need for work opportunities, actually signing them up, making sure they had access to motorcycles, for instance, for delivery, making sure that we teamed up, for instance, with the Tshwane municipality for the physical inspection of their motorcycles, because that is a requirement in Tshwane municipality in order to get a certificate of competence, making sure that they have the physical training to be able to ride a motorcycle, and all those things that actually require physical contact between people. It would be irresponsible of us as a business at a time when the country has told us that we need to lock down and keep people safe and healthy, to continue with that during the 21 months of the COVID lockdown.
I mean, except you have to comply with the law, and that is what you're doing. I'm asking about efforts. I mean, it cannot be. Sisters on the Move is operating in the same COVID lockdown that you are, and yet they are still managing to train South Africans in the townships in which they're operating to drive a motorcycle. I come into work. It's still feasible to do that. I don't think we can use lockdown as an excuse. I mean, level 5 was 2 years ago almost. So I'm just, 18 months. I suppose I'm asking, I'm asking why Uber is not doing more. One sprint a few years ago, Doesn't seem like
No.
much.
So, Mr. Hodge, taken. I think in all spheres, always more could be done. But again, I think maybe what makes my this question a little complicated is getting a lock on those numbers to begin with, right? As to the proportion. But your point is taken. Like Lindy says, I think. We do understand the obligations that we have, especially to South Africa, especially the kind of environment that we're working in. And could we do more? For sure. I mean, there shouldn't be any argument there.
Thank you, Mr. Molewa, and we look forward to seeing what develops in that respect. But as you understand, it's part of our mandate as well in terms of a market inquiry. And I suppose we understand that maybe that's why you have a market inquiry, because it's not happening, and the inquiry hopes to shift the mindset. But we look forward to engaging you then going forward around this. I don't have any more questions. You may be relieved to hear. I don't think my panel members also have. I've just checked with them. So I think from my side, just to thank you for coming and participating in the inquiry. I apologize if I looked stern, but I do appreciate that you have come, you have engaged, and I hope the public has also benefited from these interactions and the knowledge. And I look forward to hearing from you going forward on issues like drivers, transparency, and the others. And we'll obviously interact with you also in camera sessions to cover stuff that is confidential. So thank you very much, both, and Ms. Wundler as well. And we'll then, I think, move across to our next participant. But thank you. Sorry, Ms. Wundler.
Yes, Mr. Hodge, just a quick question. Would you like me to answer those 3 points that we'd left for me to get confirmation on?
Yes, please. Sorry, I didn't realize you had been fed that information. And maybe our new participant who's joined, just put your camera off. Thank you.
Sure. So question number 1 was, can merchants market directly to eaters through orders that eaters place on Uber Eats? The answer is yes. This is not prohibited in the contract or constrained in any way in the contract. The second question was, can merchants disclose their commercial terms as set out in the contracts? This is not explicitly constrained in the contracts that we have with our merchants. And the third point that you had is you wanted to know which regulations or guidelines required that we disclose that certain advertising is sponsored. In the Advertising Regulatory Board Code of Advertising Practice, at Section 2, Article 12, it requires the identification of advertisements. 12.1 holds that advertisements should be clearly distinguishable as such.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wundler, for bringing that to our attention. I think we'll certainly get hold of that Advertising Regulatory Board code and determine what obligations it does provide, and to see whether, in fact, that should be an answer to this issue or not. And thank you very much for the other 2. So I presume now the restaurants, at least if they're listening to us now, can happily put their leaflets into your delivery and not fear any reprisals. So, I think that is beneficial that they can, and I think they should. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
welcome, as I understand, Ms. Bester from Quench.
Hello, good to be here.
Thank you. And Ms. Bester, apart from welcoming you, just to advise you that obviously we're broadcasting live, it's a public hearing. And so if there is confidential information that's confidential to Quench, then please be advised not to traverse it in this hearing. And if there's a question that requires doing that, you can defer it and we'll deal with it in camera. Ms. Besters, I understand you don't have a presentation for the panel. I just wanted to check whether you have any opening statement, so to speak, or you just want us to proceed with questions.
You can proceed with questions.
All right, I'm going to pass over to my fellow panel member, Ms. Doris Tsepe, to proceed with the questions. And once she is done, there may be questions from myself or the technical team. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Ms. Bester, and welcome.
Good afternoon, Doris. Good to be here.
And thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Could I ask you to just give us a background and a bit of the evolution of Quench, just for the public to know who you are, what you're doing, when did you start, what areas are you involved in? Thank you.
Sure. So Quench was born in 2016. It was founded by Liam McCready, who came up with the idea to start delivering liquor directly to homes of the consumer by means of an online platform. And subsequently, together with Johan Grobler, they built an app, which is now known as the Quench app. And they then obtained a liquor license, which allowed them to offer this solution to consumers. And the initial proof and concept and business case in Stellenbosch was a great success. And after that, a year later, in 2017, they partnered with equity investor Dr. Van Roe in Stellenbosch, and then they were able to roll out nationally. Quench then partnered with a few retailer groups, liquor retailers, Spa Tops being the largest one, and that enabled them to roll out the service nationally. They negotiated a partnership agreement with the Spa Tops group as well as the Ultra Liquors group. And then Quench became a standalone brand backed by these two groups, and they were able to provide the solution nationwide to consumers, delivering alcohol to the homes of consumers. We, in 2020, with the onset of the COVID-19 lockdown, Quench had to quickly pivot its business. Otherwise, as you know, liquor would have been null and void. We would have had to shut our doors. And so we partnered with major groceries retailer Woolworths, and started delivering groceries to the homes of the consumers. And by successfully doing so, we were approached by the Dis-Chem Group, and in December 2020 we launched our pharmaceutical silo, and delivering groceries, pharmaceuticals, liquor, as well as restaurants to the homes of consumers. Restaurants also came about during the COVID-19 lockdown. We wanted to give local businesses who were looking at shutting their doors, wanted to give them the opportunity to continue their business by delivering their food and services to the homes of consumers. And these restaurants may or may not have already been on other platforms such as Mr. Delivery or Uber Eats or the likes of, but Quench gave them the opportunity to deliver to the homes of the consumers without the massive rebates of our said competitors. And by doing that, we open the doors to a lot smaller and local businesses, you know, the Italian pizza guy on the corner who can't afford to give 30% of his turnover to a platform such as our competitors. And we gave them the opportunity to list on the Quench app, reach thousands of consumers being our customers, and deliver to the homes of the consumer. And that is where we are at the moment as Quench. We're in 2021 and still delivering Woolworths groceries, Dis-Chem pharmaceuticals, liquor, and restaurants.
I guess starting in Stellenbosch with alcohol was just appropriate.
Well, that's exactly how how the brainchild came up, how this all happened, because Leah McCready was a student at the University of Stellenbosch at the time and saw a massive gap in the market, and that's exactly how Quench was born.
Thank you. I have a son who is at university. Thank God he's not Stellenbosch. I just wanted to discuss the business model. It's a very interesting business model, Ms. Bester, and thank you for sharing that journey with us. Could you just, both from the grocery, from the alcohol, the grocery, and to some extent the farmer, there seems to be a need for national chains as a model. I mean, do you want to expand a bit more on that? It looks like once you had Spar Tops as a national brand, you were able to expand your footprint nationally. Do you want to elaborate more and what the importance of that was for your business to be able to pivot even in the areas that it did?
Yeah, sure. So, like I said, we started in Stellenbosch, but having the agreements in place with national and major retailers, we're able to extend our footprint nationally. Currently, we're operating in major hubs only, so urban areas, Johannesburg, Pretoria, Durban, Cape Town, Cape Winelands, as well as the Garden Route down in the Southern Cape. But it's essentially where these retailers want to offer delivery services and specifically on-demand delivery. As you know, the likes of Woolworths had a delivery platform or delivery service in place, but it was at the time taking up to 2-3 weeks to get goods delivered to the consumer's door. And when ordering the likes of groceries or pharmaceuticals, you don't want your goods in 3 weeks' time. You want it today or tomorrow at least. So by it was mutually beneficial. So for us, we were able to extend our platform nationally, and for the retailer, they were able to offer an on-demand service whereby their consumers can place an order now and get it today.
I was going to come to that, to say there obviously must be a market space for specialist delivery, on-demand delivery service, such as a Quench, as against a store-owned delivery. And just you've just touched on the long delivery, the long time for delivery. What are the other challenges that a store-owned delivery service would have, or they face with?
Yes. So it's the on-demand delivery space is incredibly challenging. I don't think it's everybody and anybody that can just leap into the space and successfully deliver within 30 to 60, maybe 120 minutes. It requires a lot of resource. It's labor intensive. We have a massive complement of support staff and customer care. So I think for a retailer, focusing on what they do, and what they do is buy and sell products, for them to be able to offer delivery as well, from a national point of view, I think that requires a whole new business case and a whole new business side that they don't necessarily have the know-how for or the resources for. And that's exactly where the likes of Quench come in, because we have the on-the-ground teams, we have the customer care, we have the support staff, we have the communication, we have the platform, which is essentially what our product is, the app, to be able to reach a national footprint. And therefore, retailers can just focus on what they do, and that is buying and selling products from the shelf and off the shelf.
Thank you. Just in terms of the team, I mean, you say it's a labor intensive process. So what sort of services do the support team provide?
So our support team is currently about 20 to 30 people strong on a daily basis. They sit here in our head office at Quench in Stellenbosch. And what they do is when we have an order come in, they ensure that that order is recognized and picked, processed, and delivered. And whatever glitch may occur in that entire process, they make sure that the customer is always informed. They make sure that the shopper and the other is always informed. So at all times, every single stakeholder of the process is aware of what is going on. And Quench specifically, we take our customer care very seriously. We like our customers to know what's going on at the point of the order and the delivery. So our support team is incredibly important for this function. When we bring up to 5 and to navigate that and to navigate every single touch point and person responsible in this process takes some work. So our support team is very, very important in that regard.
Thank you. I'm going to come to the customer, and clearly it seems to be an important component of what you do, and I'm going to speak to you about customer acquisition. But before I go there, I just wanted to ask, you spoke about equity partners, and I just wanted to talk to you. Quite interesting, we've had a number of people come, and funding in this area seemed to be a very difficult component particularly for smaller businesses, and you seem to have been very fortunate in that regard. I mean, to what extent is funding an important component for you, and how did the acquisition of an equity partner and the partnership with the retailers help you to be able to expand your footprint, for example? Or is it, or am I assuming?
If you are assuming it, your assumption is incorrect.
Sorry, Ms. Bester.
There are many elements to...
Sorry, could you just start? We lost you there for a second. Sorry about that.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Thank you. Please proceed.
Yeah. So because the on-demand delivery space has so many elements to it that are all equally important, and to make it work, every single element requires, like I said before, resources and also technology. So I'll start with the technology, acquiring and developing a tech team. And as we all know, they are highly, highly skilled and sought after individuals. For that process, you need a lot of funding and a lot of carrying of the business until it actually gets to a point where it is profitable. And further to that, the actual staff complement that make all elements of on-demand delivery happen is also key to making it a success. So we're talking about a high salary for the staff complement. We have technology and equipment and all of that. So funding is detrimental and very, very important in a business of this nature. We initially got funding from our investor, like I mentioned before, but then
Sorry, Ms. Bester, to disturb you. We're losing you just as you were starting to talk about funding. Can you just, if you could just repeat? I'm very sorry about that.
No problem. So I said that subsequently to our equity partner that we got on board in 2017, we also got funding from Imvelo Ventures, which is the investment arm of Capitec Bank, and they acquired a percentage of the business. And by that funding, we were able to carry on, and then we were able to also roll out with our retail partners and able to roll out nationally. Because with that comes the acquisition of vehicles, the acquisition of more technology, more equipment, etc., etc. So yes, it's an ongoing ask for funds, and our funders and our investors are very much aware of this. But it's exciting. It's an exciting. On-demand, especially, or e-commerce in general, is the future. Are you losing me again?
We are just intermittently, and we are wondering. The IT team has just suggested to us that maybe you switch off the video, and maybe it may be a network issue. That maybe if you switch off the video, we would be able to hear you better. It's a pity though, because it's good to see you and interact with you in that way. But I think it may be better to do so, if you don't mind.
Sure. If we have problems again, I will switch off. I just connected to a different network, and it already seems a lot better. So
okay.
We're looking good.
Thank you for doing that. Yes.
What did you miss?
I think you ended at a point where you were listing the sort of acquisitions funding helped you with, and I think words to the effect that it is exciting. So I don't know if you were ending that session or that response, or you wanted to add more.
Yes, I basically just said that the e-commerce space and technology space is very exciting for investors and funders. So everyone is very excited when we go back for more funding, because they know what the nature of the business is and what funding it actually requires in order to make it profitable in future.
Ms. Bester, just given what we have heard from other small businesses, and that you are able to go back and ask for more, and funders are excited in this space, I'm just interested. I mean, I would really be interested in just share your advice, particularly with small businesses that maybe out there wanting to enter the space and want to access the sort of funding. How did you go about it? Obviously, without any confidential information, but just the strategy. Because I think we are interested as an inquiry to look at how people can access funding in order to enter these markets and participate. So I was very interested in what you managed to do, and would really like to hear your insights. What are the things people could do in order to do to access that kind of funding? Thanks.
Yeah, sure. So I think the number one thing for us is anyone who has ever come on board at Quench has really believed in the product. We think that we offer a turnkey solution for on-demand shopping. We are a platform that offers more than just restaurant food, or more than just groceries or pharma or liquor. We have several silos and several services that we offer on the app, giving the consumer an all-round solution and turnkey solution to their shopping needs. And therefore, every single one of us at Quench really do believe in the product. That's the first thing. The second thing is we as a team, especially at executive level and in marketing, we have worked very hard at bringing the brand to life. Anyone and everyone that sees Quench as a brand knows that it's vibrant, it's fun, it's accessible. And so I think that customers and consumers can really relate to the brand. And in that way, we have put trust in the consumer, and we were able to continue to grow our customer base. And also, together with the funding that we have and continue to get, we're able to continue growing that brand and the reputation that we have. I think there's also a bit of luck involved. We have had previously, we've had investors who are very invested in the business and take it very seriously, and they are hands-on, and they know what the day-to-day operations are like and what it entails. So as a funder, I would imagine not knowing what that entails, they would easily go back and step aside after a couple of million have been spent and go, I can't do this anymore. But our investors are interested. They know what the day-to-day is like, and therefore they see how the money gets burnt and what it gets burnt on, and why it's necessary to keep on funding this business. Because I think all of them and all of us here at Quench see the potential in future, and we continue to grow that potential.
Did you just, I'm referring to Mr. McCready, I hope I'm saying his name correctly, knock on the door and just, the first equity partner, hello, my name is Doris. I'm here seeking funding. This is my business model. I'm trying to think of that kind of interaction. Is that the kind, or is there networking? Is there knowing people? As you rightly say, trust plays an important role. How do you do that? Yeah.
Sure. So Liam McCready is someone who from a very young age have always been able to network and put himself in the right places at the right time. And I think that's what happened for him. He was in Stellenbosch, and for some other way or reason, he met our first investor and was able to convince him that this is a business that will work one day. And this is 5 years ago. At that time, e-commerce is not what it is today. I think COVID-19 also helped to sort of expedite that, the customer's perception of e-commerce and the use thereof. But back then, I think he had a vision, and he knew that this was going to be a success. And by doing that, or by having that vision, he was able to convince investors that this will work. So to answer your question in short, I think it was a case of networking. He was lucky to be able to meet the people that he did meet, and with our initial investor, Dr. Roo, we were able to open that network of that door, just to a whole new network of people, equity partners, investors, and by such be able to get to know a whole lot of more potential investors, and that's how we kept on growing and kept on acquiring partners.
Thank you. I was interested. I mean, this is very fascinating. Just, I just wanted to ask. I mean, it's almost a similar question, but in relation to national chains like a Spar, like a Woolies. When you did, most platforms, the smaller platforms that we have spoken to, and you touch on it when you speak of restaurants in particular, is how they have found the importance of national chains or franchise in delivery or logging onto their platforms, and you although we're hoping in restaurants you would go onto a niche of the local market, you do say that you have realized that the need for national chains. I just wanted to find out, even with the Spar tops, was it also just a matter of this is a model we're going to knock on a big brand like Spar and Ultra Liquor, and similarly with the Woolies? And I mean, I heard you said Discam, they actually approached you, but with these three, is that how you went about it, and what were those strategies?
So the most important thing for Quench at the time was to increase our turnover, but also increase our revenue and profit, essentially. So we just by buying alcohol and delivering it to the homes of the consumer wasn't going to grow our revenue. So we needed to partner with someone, one who had a national footprint, and secondly, who were able to offer us good pricing, so that we are able to offer good pricing to our consumers, essentially. So we needed to partner with national retailers such as Spar Tops, Ultra Liquors, and now Macro and the likes of, to be able to offer our consumer a good price, but essentially, or importantly, also to grow our revenue. So we felt, and just to get back to local restaurants, the strategy there was, for us, was to offer local, smaller businesses the opportunity to compete in a market where they have the reach of 50 to 60 to 90,000 people, where with COVID-19 having to close their doors, they were, or prior to that, they were only able to reach, let's say, 100-kilometer radius around them. But now they were able to offer this service to everyone around them who we were able to deliver to. And partnering with national retailers, that also, like I said before, expanded our footprint. And for us, that enabled us to roll out nationally.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bester. I just wanted to chat to you just a little bit about customer acquisition, which is another component of this relationship, as to how did you go about that? What were your strategies? Where are we at now? Do you still see growth in which component of the areas that you are in? And what are you doing, I mean, to try and lure these consumers to Quench?
Yes, so I love talking about this because marketing is where I'm at. So it's it's a case of hit and miss in the beginning. Um, Firstly, we know who our core customer, what our customer looks like. We're looking at a market that's able to download an app, so have data on their smartphone, download an app, have the means to shop on high-end retailers like Woolworths and Dis-Chem. Secondly, or thirdly, have the means to get it delivered. So able to invest in that convenience. And so just with those three things, we are able to sort of narrow down who we're targeting. And then further to that, we segment it into, the parents at home, or the full-time worker, or the celebrity, or the sportsman, et cetera, et cetera. So we're really able to narrow down our market and our target market. And then we figure out, how do we reach them? And being an online business or an e-commerce business, we know that that's where we are going to reach them. So we reach them via digital marketing, firstly being Google, our best friend Google, via SEO, banner displays, display ads, via the Google Display Network. And then, of course, a massive key marketing channel for us is social media, of course. We spend a lot of money in social media to create brand awareness, to create an online presence, so that customers and potential customers see us, are aware of us, use us, get to trust us, and come back to us. Customer acquisition as a whole is, like I mentioned earlier, is a hit and miss. So we sometimes roll out with a certain strategy. For example, we would use a certain website to advertise, and then we would completely hit the mark. And we would go back to an older strategy or one we've used before. We see it works, we implement it again, slightly tweak it so that we can reach a wider audience or potentially a different audience, and then see if that works. At this stage of the game, and where Quench is at the moment, we really have narrowed down our strategy, and we know exactly what to do, when to do it, who to partner with in terms of people, influencers, key events, key interests nationally, and in terms of the general South African. So we now know how to acquire a customer, but essentially it's about retaining that customer. So customer acquisition is easy, fairly easy, but it's to retain that customer. Therein lies the challenge, is for your customer to use you. Firstly, to use you is the major challenge. But once you've overcome that, to retain that customer, to build trust, for them to able to use you again, and then eventually what we call our, the word has left me now, our loyal customers. That is where the challenge lies. So that is where we focus on, is customer retention, and we do that by means of various strategies. So one very, very important one for us is our customer care team. We have a very personalized service, so our support staff ensure that they are always on the ball. Our customers know exactly who they're speaking to. There's always a human on the other side of the line, not a bot or a machine or an automated message. It's always a human on the other side of the line. So that is a unique selling point for Quench. And we give them what we promise. So our delivery promise is within 60 to 120 minutes. With pharmaceuticals, it's a lot quicker. It's 60 minutes. So we make sure that we promise on that we deliver on that promise. And by doing so, our customers get to trust us. they love us, and so they come back. And that retention is where we focus.
That is a key. What is it? Discovery, try out, and then loyalty. That's what you marketers say. Yes.
Exactly.
And any use of promos? I mean, in the restaurant business, we see a lot of that as a mechanism to acquire and retain customers. Is there any use, and how do you deal with that, and how, yeah?
So for us in the restaurant space specifically, the margins are already very tight and very small. So we offer the restaurant or the business owner the opportunity to run their own promos. Because Quench takes 10% of whatever that basket value is, if they are willing to, give on their margin, that is already so tight, that is their indaba. Quench don't necessarily offer promos in the restaurant space, simply for that reason, because the margins are already so tight. With groceries and pharmaceuticals, we're able to offer a lot more wider spectrum of specials and promo codes. Most of our promos run on delivery specifically, so we will offer free delivery for a day. We will offer a discount on certain products. But what is a big element for us is the partners that we have with brands. So the likes of Heineken, Coca-Cola, Pernod Ricard, Distell, Diageo, and more, we're able to partner and offer the customer a really, really good deal on the platform. And by doing so, we're also giving these partners and these big brands, let's say Coca-Cola, for example, the opportunity to reach up to 90,000 people in the e-commerce space. So by partnering and strategizing promotions and deals for our customer, we're able to benefit both ways for the brand and for Quench and for the customer.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bester, and thank you for sharing. I mean, it's been a fascinating conversation. Can I just turn to the next important question? Is how do you monetize? I mean, you've touched on it a little bit on restaurants, and just if you could just explain to us with regards to the others as well.
Sure thing. So our customers place an order on the Quench app. There is a set delivery fee. We are moving into a scaled delivery fee, but I'm not going to get into that now. So the delivery fee is purely to cover the costs of the driver and our in-store shopper. So Quench as a business does not see a cent of the delivery fee. That goes to the picker in-store and the driver. How we monetize, we have strong and very, very solid relationships with our retailers. So it's the likes of Spar, Ultra Liquors, Macro, and then of course the two big ones, Woolworths and Dis-Chem. And we have rebate agreements in place with those retailers. And we're able to offer mostly in-store prices for our customers. And by offering in-store prices, we're able to give our customer a good price on products. But as Quench, we're able to receive a rebate from the retailer on whatever we have, whatever the revenue was for the month. So that's how we monetize. We also do that by means of partnering with brands, like I've mentioned before. Brands see major value in advertising on the Quench app. So we offer advertising space on the Quench app, and we're able to display brands and deals and promotions on the app. and that's also how we bring in revenue. The likes of Heineken and Coca-Cola, as you know, have big advertising budgets, and they're able to spend on advertising. And I think the focus for a lot of them is e-commerce. So they have sort of moved their strategies into focusing into e-commerce. So they spend a lot of money on the platform to advertise. So yes, those are the two ways that we monetize the business.
Ask you just on the driver delivery model that you operate. Could you just explain a little bit on that? Did you understand? Okay.
Yes, sure. I hope I'm going to answer your question correctly, but we have a network of drivers nationally. Some of them are Quench drivers, so that means they have a bike that is funded by Quench, and we offer a rent-to-own model for these drivers. So they rent these bikes from us on a weekly or a monthly basis, and eventually they will own them. They also then, of course, get the delivery fee, and that's how they make an income. We pay them weekly, so they are able to pay us weekly for the rental of their vehicle, and they know that they will eventually own this vehicle. We then also have another network of drivers, which we call our freelance drivers, and they might drive for other companies or other platforms such as Uber or Mr. Delivery or even Checker 6060 or the likes of, but those are freelance drivers. So they are not always available and at Quench's beck and call. So we give preference to our Quench drivers. But when we have, let's say, a spike in orders on a Monday morning and our drivers are all on the road and we're having to get a delivery or an order delivered to a customer within that promised timeline, we have a network of freelance drivers to call on, and we're able to utilize them to execute the deliveries. I hope that answered your question.
It actually does. Thank you so much. I just wanted to understand with the first relationship of the drivers, what you call the Quench drivers, that is still a sort of an independent contractor type relationship, or are they employed by Quench?
100% independent contractors. But what is attractive for them and what makes them loyal to Quench is the fact that they have these bikes that they will eventually own. So they prioritize Quench orders over. They are able and they are allowed to drive for any other platform or service or do whatever they want to do. They are independent contractors, but they have a loyalty to Quench because they have these bikes funded by Quench, and that is part of their contract. They have to prioritize Quench orders over anything else.
Essentially, you would have an SLA, like there's a certain time that they should dedicate to Quench, presumably.
100%, yes.
How do you source your drivers?
Well, that is a whole challenge on its own. We have quite a strong operations group. So we have a head of operations, and under him we have regional managers. And our regional managers are each responsible for their own region. And they acquire drivers via literally going to a shopping mall and approaching drivers who stand on the side of the road with their bikes. And they would approach them and ask them whether they would be interested in being a Quench driver. And like I said, what makes that attractive for a driver is the fact that we give them a vehicle, we give them uniform, we give them everything for them to be able to successfully execute orders for Quench. And then also we get approached by a lot of people, not only in the driver space, but in general, as we know, there are a lot of people in South Africa seeking employment, so we do get a lot of inquiries about or for drivers. So we're able to acquire through many ways, but essentially it is a regional manager's responsibility for his region. And we then vet those drivers, and then our head of operations will be able to say, yes, so this will be a Quench driver, let's issue him with a bike, let's issue him with a uniform and a smartphone and everything that he needs.
Is there, would imagine over and above the uniform, the bike, some training required? And do you provide that as Quench?
Yes, we take our training very seriously, again, not just in the driver space, but across the board. Because we are working with customers, and because customer is key and customer is king, every touch point of our delivery process has to do with the customer. So we train our drivers and we retrain our drivers whenever we can. We also train our pickers, our in-store shoppers. We have daily engagements with those. That's why our regional managers are so important. They see them and engage with them on a daily basis to ensure that they are delivering the service that they need to. And then, of course, we provide training at head office level. We train our support staff. We offer courses and development and skills development for some of our key employees, such as HR and finance, etc. So yes, we take training very seriously.
Thank you. My last question with regard to this and is still about drivers. We spoke to one of the small businesses called Sisters on the Move earlier this morning. I don't know if you were able to listen, but one of the key things that they were doing with drivers was to try and firstly target youth, South African youth that are unemployed, to be drivers in particular, and train them. And they're looking at various projects to try and get those who don't have a code 2, don't know how to ride a bike. Are you sort of, do you intentionally go and target various, when you look at drivers, are you targeting various profile of people, or is it just looking across the board? And when would you be looking at people even without the necessary training, but to train them to get to that level? Thank you.
So the priority for us to acquire a driver is definitely a person who would potentially be previously disadvantaged. So they don't have a bike, they don't have the means to purchase or fund a bike. And for us, a Quench driver is priority. So yes, we would target a person that doesn't have the means to be able to fund their own equipment and necessary skills to be able to drive for Quench. So yes, that is a priority. But other than that, we do require quite a large network of drivers. So we pick them up wherever we can. If we know of or are aware of drivers that are looking for more work, more projects, more deliveries, we will acquire them regardless of their background, regardless of what they have or don't have. But to answer your question, absolutely, we target persons that don't have the means to acquire or purchase their own vehicle.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bester. Chair.
Ms. Bester, I'm just going to ask Mr. Lesofe to ask you questions. He seems to have some follow-ups.
Thank you,
Sure.
Chair. Good afternoon, Ms. Bester. I just have a few follow-up questions on the food delivery side. You mentioned that your commission fee is 10%. Is it the same across all restaurants?
Yes, so we offer a flat fee of 10%, and that is what we take of the full basket value from the restaurant.
Some of your competitors or food delivery platforms in the market seems to differentiate. I'm not sure if you followed the discussion and debate before your session. If I may ask, why do you charge a flat commission fee?
Well, the goal for us with restaurants was not to make money. Everybody wants to make money, but with the onset of the COVID-19 lockdown, we wanted and we saw the struggle of local restaurants, and we wanted to give local restaurants the opportunity to be showcased on a platform such as Quench, because they were unable to list themselves on other platforms because of the high rebates that these other platforms take from them. So another competitor that takes almost 30%, a restaurant that is very small, doesn't have a big revenue, it is impossible for them to give 30% of their basket size to the platform. And that was the goal with starting restaurants. We wanted to give local restaurants the opportunity to showcase their business on Quench and be able to continue to deliver through the lockdown.
Indeed, they must be benefiting from your lower rates. Would you say or do you know if they pass on the benefit to end consumers?
I'm not sure. So for the Quench model is very basic. It is whatever the restaurateur offers to the end consumer. It's purely we take 10%. There's no other rebates, nothing, no discounts, nothing at all. So if the restaurant decides that they want to offer something specific to the end consumer, they are that happens at their own discretion. We would still be taking 10% of whatever the basket value is.
I may have missed this. What is your delivery fee?
It differs across all silos. So I'm going to start with liquor because that's where we started. So a liquor delivery will cost a consumer 35 Rand. That's a flat fee. For Woolworths and Dis-Chem, it's 60 Rand delivery, and that is split into 35 Rand for the driver and 25 Rand that goes to the in-store shopper. Restaurant deliveries are exactly the same. It's a 35 Rand delivery. But like I mentioned before, and something I can't delve into at this stage because it's still in development, we are implementing a scaled model where the further the driver goes, the more he gets paid, or the closer he is. And that also benefits the customer, because if they're 2 kilometers from the shop where we operate out of, they pay less than someone who is, for example, 10 kilometers from a store.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Lesofi. Ms. Bester, I've just got a couple of questions. So I don't think I caught your designation in Quench.
I'm the head of marketing and brand at Quench.
Well, I'm glad we have you, because the question I just wanted to ask is about consumer expectations and how they're set. So you mentioned earlier Woolworths took, I didn't know it was 2 weeks to deliver your food, but you're coming in on the on-demand space, 60 minutes to 120, and I suppose maybe the success of Checkers 60/60 do those set expectations in the market amongst consumers?
Absolutely. We find that expectation grows by the day. The other day, we heard of someone who delivers groceries within 20 minutes, and that's their promise. So from Woolworths delivering their groceries in a 2 week, so you can book your time slot 2 weeks in advance, going to 60 to 120 minutes. That was already a large jump for the retailer. And now, with it being a very, very competitive space, the e-commerce and on-demand space, everyone is fighting for the best service delivery. So now that we're able to deliver within 60 to 120 minutes, the bar is set, and everyone, or there will always be someone who will better that and push the boundaries and push the benchmark. Yes, that is the expected, the expectancy of the customer, even with the likes of platforms who don't call themselves on demand. For example, takealot.com, they used to deliver within, let's say, 5 to 7 days, and now it is 1 to 2 days, sometimes 3 to 4. So that bar is set very high, and it continues to go higher and higher. But we're very happily able and willing to compete in that space, better ourselves.
Great. And so just, we're interested in consumer journeys here as well. I mean, once those expectations get set, does this become part of the consumer's sort of part of their selection about which platform they want to use? And would a platform that, let's say, is 3 days, find that they are able to get traction with consumers or not as a result of changed expectations?
So to answer your question, yes, I do think a customer or a consumer's choice that they make is based on one, service, and two, a product offering. But because of our product offering, we simply we have to deliver on demand. If we pick a frozen hake from Woolworths' freezers, we have to deliver it within the hour. Where another platform, for example, who don't deliver groceries, who deliver, let's say, pharmaceuticals or clothing, don't necessarily have to compete in that space because they don't have to deliver because of, let's say, a cold chain issue or something else. So in that space specifically, let's say food or something that requires a very strict cold chain policy, yes, I think customers do make a choice based on who delivers the fastest, and it's very competitive. Our competitors are brilliant. Everyone is brilliant, so we have to constantly better ourselves and increase the delivery service. So yes, customers are picky.
And we had a discussion earlier in this week with Macro and their head of e-commerce was at Walmart. But it seemed that precisely because of what you've mentioned, the cold chain, that maybe the preferred model with groceries, at least where they're perishables, that it is done from the store because the cold chain is and not from a warehouse, and so maybe, but with non-perishables, and that may be your liquor selection, obviously warehouse is more possible. I mean, maybe you can just give us some insight into the operating models. That do you look at a warehouse solution in some contexts, or is it all in store?
So because of our technology and how our app is set up, a customer is connected to a certain geofence, and that geofence is based on a store. So we operate out of stores solely. And the reason for that is because we're able to pick quickly off the shelf. It's like a customer walking into a store, picking off the shelf, paying for it in the delivery vehicle and gone. If we had to implement a warehousing or a DC model, it would be slightly more complicated, as you know, and we wouldn't be able to deliver within that promised time frame.
And maybe a last question, just on, again, customer expectations. Obviously, there's some platforms offering free delivery. It may not be in the grocery space, But does that start to affect expectations? Because you're charging a fee, and does that tend to direct consumer traffic or not?
Again, I think when we're talking about groceries, pharmaceuticals, any fast-moving consumer goods per se, I don't think free delivery actually exists. Free delivery would come in where a basket value is really high, and the platform may or may not have rebate agreements in place with actual supplier, giving them the ability to offer free delivery because they can increase their margins via a rebate.
All right, that makes sense. It's a different operating model, yeah. And you would offer, I think, as you said, in-store prices. Then it's the rebate that's monetizing your platform.
100%.
Well, Ms. Bester, thank you very much for your time and affording the panel and the technical team your insights as Quench. I think we've certainly learned a fair bit, and especially you're the first in terms of more the grocery side of the business. So I think it's just left for me to thank you, and I'm sure we'll be in touch potentially over the next few months or not, if we do have any follow-up questions, just to find out, and to wish your business all the best, especially going into the festive season.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It was good to be here and good to be part of this journey with the Competition Commission.
Thank you. So with that, I'm going to close the session. Tomorrow morning, we're still continuing with delivery platforms, and in the morning we have Paarl Eats and WeDash, which are local delivery services in Paarl, and then I think Mitchell's Plain. We've got the Restaurant Association of South Africa, and that makes up the morning session, and then in the afternoon we have Mr. D. Thank you very much. We'll close that session.